Hello, welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Meera Das, and I'm a software test analyst. I'm delighted to be promoting the Girls in ICT initiative, and I'm thrilled to be having a discussion about tech and tech careers with Aarti Holla-Maini, the Secretary General of ESOA, the EMEA Satellite Operators Association. Talking Tech is a series celebrating girls and women in technology, being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day 2020 and Girls in ICT Day 2021. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April and took place on the 23rd of April this year. The objectives of Girls in ICT Day are to help create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in the growing field of information and communication technology. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, UNICC, and is in support of the Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age. ESOA and myself as a woman in technology are pleased to be partner on this session today. The goals of the series include to inspire girls and younger women with information about a range of potential ICT careers, to present some of the role model women in tech and share information about their career pathways, to offer diverse examples of how ICT is being used to support the achievement of sustainable development goals and other UN goals, to showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies or future ICT careers, and finally, to provide girls with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote a Girls in Tech organization they may be involved with and showcase it to a broader international audience. To kick this session off, I'm going to introduce you to Aarti. She has been the Secretary General of ESOA since 2004, where she represents 20 satellite operators and works with their CEOs to showcase the benefits of satellite communications, which are vital to bridging the world's digital divide, achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and realizing an inclusive and sustainable 5G ecosystem. She is also a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Space Technology. So Aarti, tenu hun 20 saal ho gaye ne space industry vich. Dasso, lawyer ho ke space de vich kis tarah pahunch gaye?
मीरा जी सच है कि ਅਸੀਂ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹਾਂ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੇਖਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਸਮਝ ਆਏਗੀ ਸੋ ਅਗਰ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਚ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇ ਦਾਂ
Sure, it's just that we're both Punjabis.
You're right. Let me start with the career path, how I got here, and start with the Indian side of it, because my career plans were actually quite modest to start with. Very much in line with the sheltered Indian upbringing that I had, which I'm sure you can empathize with. But when you're Indian and you're raised as I was, I knew I needed to become a professional, but not a career woman. Because if you become a career woman, the fear is that you will become too independent, and that compromises your chance of securing a good match. But it was actually my affinity for languages that really set me on this path and took me abroad, first with my bachelor's in Germany, and then to Paris and New York for my MBA. And during my time abroad, I was doing what I did best. I was using my languages and interpersonal skills and actually discovering who I really was beneath the layers of conditioning that my upbringing had given me. And that growth, in hindsight, I can see that it was really essential to where I am today. But I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, and technology was definitely not on my mind. But I was always spontaneous and curious. So when doors opened and opportunities presented themselves, I jumped in first, and I thought about them later, and even worried about them later as well. But one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was living in Munich. I was on a corporate young manager program at Daimler-Benz Aerospace. I still remember sitting in the aeroplane with a dictionary looking up aerospace because I wasn't quite sure what it was when I was going there. But that was my entry into the space sector back in '97. And it was really a very traditional German engineering house. There were very few women working there apart from secretaries. And I really stood out, first of all, because I was Indian, and most people there had not actually worked with many Indians before. But also my closest colleague was Polish, and people stared at us daily. We were both women, but we weren't secretaries. I was dark, she was light, and we both worked with the senior management, which for a big establishment, which is full of mostly German male satellite engineers, senior management was really a shroud of mystery. But at the same time, I have to say, we were very much appreciated because we were women, and that brought color to the monotony there, but also because we added value. And I have to say, I loved working in aerospace. I loved working in Munich. Who wouldn't? Space is cool. It's unusual. We had military helicopters, which are one of the products of EADS back in the day, doing demos right outside our window for customers. It was amazing. It was fun. It was fascinating. And when you are working in a fun and fascinating environment, that is a perfect backdrop for learning and growth. But unfortunately, that was a good thing that came to an end. And after 3 years in Germany, there was an opportunity to become the German representative in a European joint venture for the European Galileo satellite navigation program that I'm sure you've heard about. Personally, I knew I had to move forward somehow. So I took that offer, and it brought me to Brussels. That was a big shock. Brussels is all about politics. I was not. So at first I really hated it. I hated the politics, the egos, the processes that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I found myself really, really out of my depth. But after 4 years, I did know my way around. And another opportunity in a different part of the space sector came along. So I moved to ISOA. So here we are. And ISOA is very different. All of a sudden, I reported directly to a board of CEOs. I mean, Brussels advocacy can be high level and vague and not always tangible. CEOs are high level, but they are anything but not vague. They want clear results. So at that time, even though satellite operators were, they represented the cream of the industry, very successful companies, but nobody had actually heard of them. So I had a blank sheet on which I could create to bring visibility to this sector that does really great things. It transforms people's lives with connectivity, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And every year, I have to say, the job keeps reinventing itself. It presents new challenges. It keeps me motivated and very intellectually stimulated. Sometimes it's so hard. I really struggle. But you're always on a growth curve, both professional and personal.
Sounds like a very interesting career journey there. So what would you say, I guess, sort of moving on to what you enjoy best about space technology?
Yeah, so I find space technology fascinating, regardless of the fact that I work for this industry now. What we have achieved as a race and how we continue to push the boundaries within the limits obviously provided by physics always puts a smile on my face. I have made my children watch countless launches online with me because they're so excited. Including watching the first ever landing of a SpaceX launcher, so they take a satellite, but they actually then land back on a boat. How can you not love being involved in a sector that does that? I think it's a little bit like how the world was captivated by the moon landing back in '69. But another thing I like is that working in this sector, many people assume I'm an engineer. I'm not, but I do like it when they think I am. I think this maybe goes back to my upbringing. Somehow for me, the soft skills, interpersonal skills, language skills, and things like that always felt like they were not real intelligence. But being good at maths and all the science stuff like you are, Meera, that was what I kind of have always identified in my mind as being smart. Of course, meanwhile, I understand that emotional intelligence and those soft skills are as important as the rest. But I'm not a scientist. I do have a scientific mind. And I always need to understand how things work. And I love learning. And there's quite a bit of that in my job. For one, because it literally is space science. So I'm forever calling my colleagues, experts from my members, and having them translate techie stuff into plain English for me. or calling even CEOs to have their perspective. And they tell the story of how our technology changes lives just so well. So I try to take all the stuff that I get from my experts and my CEOs and use that to improve my own contribution. And there's lots of challenges in that, but it's really satisfying when you can see how you make a difference. And there's a direct connection between satellite technology and people's lives. And so when you can see that you're impacting that, and you hear all the case studies and you tell people about what your members are doing, it's hugely satisfying.
That's certainly very interesting. So what kind of challenges do you think you faced over the years, and how did you overcome them?
Lots of challenges, Meera, and they're not stopping either. But first of all, I think if I think back, probably breaking out of the norm after being raised in a culture where some education is a good thing, but too much is not, already presented its challenges. I'm referring to deciding not to stay in England and get married at the time I was meant to, but actually deciding to go overseas for an MBA. On the personal side, though, I'm really lucky that even though my parents talked the talk as they should do, in reality, they always encouraged me, and they were always very proud of my achievements. But it reminds me of one particular thing I faced, which was when I got into my MBA. The school planted seeds of doubt in me from the very beginning, from before I started. So I did the GMAT, I wrote the essays, I did the tests, I went through the interviews, I got in. But while they offered me a place, they actually called me and they suggested that maybe I shouldn't accept it. I couldn't believe it. And they said, look, we are worried that you are going to be one of the people who's going to take the longest to find a job afterwards because you have very little work experience going in. So it was a genuine concern, and I understood them, but it threw me, and I ignored them. I had decided I wanted to do this, and once I make my mind up, I can't carry on that way. And, you know, the MBA started in September. I did job interviews, 2 of them in October. I did an assessment center in November, and I was ultimately the first person on my MBA to actually have a job offer in December of the very same year. So even if others presume all kinds of things about you, it's really important to believe in yourself. And that was something that I realized quite early on. Another challenging experience was a bit later on when I moved to Brussels. I had to find my feet in a really political environment. I worked for what is today Airbus. It was then EADS Astrium, and we were the major shareholder in a joint venture with 2 competing companies. And the representatives of the competing companies really tried to undermine me personally so that I couldn't perform professionally. And it felt really personal. It was. They were deliberately trying to make me feel like a young, inexperienced girl, not woman, girl. But what I realized afterwards, that this was tactics, this was politics in itself. I just had no idea how to deal with it. And they were successful for a short while because I was distracted from my work because I was so upset. But ultimately, it was actually by focusing on my work that I got through it. I've realized it's very easy for people to try to patronize you because you're a woman, and it's important to see that for what it is and not engage, because then that noise just gets louder. Yeah, I think those are the challenges. I have challenges every day in my job. I deal with complex technical issues, and I'm not technical, as I've said, but you have to try to extract elements from that and see how it fits into the strategy of the satellite sector and how we can leverage what we do at a technical level to drive a favorable climate, you know, regulatory, industrial policy, political climate for our sector. Sometimes it's daunting, and it often has me stumped. Intellectually, it can be very difficult sometimes, but that's where you realize the value of having access to so many smart and experienced people, as I do within my membership and amongst the network that I've created. So I think it's important to never be afraid to ask for help and to be clear when you don't understand, and learn when you're confronted with a challenge.
That's certainly very inspirational for me, hearing that and how you've sort of overcome the challenges and kept on moving forwards in your career. Who would you say is your inspiration?
I struggled with this. I thought, oh God, this is going to be like an interview question. Of all of the people in the world, who would you most like to have dinner with? In giving it thought, I actually realized that my mother is probably my first inspiration. And it's probably been on a very subconscious level. You know, my mum was not popular, but she always got the job done. I remember how she could single-handedly organize, cook, and host a fabulous dinner for 70 people without too much trouble. And I think it's because of her that I'm focused, I'm determined, and I'm efficient. And I'm probably not always very popular either, because she never taught me how to do that. But my focus is first to get the job done. And I think that's what my CEOs want as well. So I'm working on my shortcomings as well, rest assured. I've also obviously been inspired with some of the people I work with. In ISOA, over the last 15 years, I've had the great privilege of working with a lot of CEOs and very directly with them. And we have gone, you know, a very distinguished, wise, grey-haired generation who are very kind and gave nurturing advice to a much younger generation of CEOs who want results yesterday and who are much stricter with you, and perhaps a little less nurturing than what I was spoiled with in the past. But what I learned from that previous generation is to keep things in perspective and never forget that you can get the job done without losing compassion for other people. And that's something that I remind myself of, and it helps me to actually keep calm and remember that the rush and urgency that today's generation feels, you don't have to bring that turbulence into your job and into the way you work. You can do it in a calm way, and remembering that you're still human. I also find myself constantly inspired by women I meet. Many of them are mums, and I identify with that. But they're also very often in really demanding jobs like I am, and often in technical ones. So it's good to see how different women are all masters at their work and in their home. And even if you think, you know, you have a really tough day, and you think, God, my life's so hard. You look at others and you think you can do it, you know, and you're not alone. And you know, in Brussels, I'm based in Brussels, and most of the digital trade associations here are actually led by women. And in my own work, I have many women colleagues amongst my members, and each one is as tough as nails. And then when you look at the international scene, there too, Doreen Bogdan at the ITU, Enrica Porcari with World Food Programme, or even all of the women prime ministers that have been elected in recent times. There are some great examples out there, and I think they can inspire not only young professionals and young women, but also me.
Absolutely. There's a lot to be taken away from that. Thank you very much. And on to my next question. How do you balance work-life responsibilities, more so in this COVID climate?
So this is something that I've always struggled with, and I continue to struggle with. And I quite frankly, I've often failed to achieve that balance, and my family knows it and has suffered a lot of it. But thankfully, I'm getting older. And as I get older, I can see more clearly the consequences of that. And I'm constantly renewing my commitment to improve. I have improved. I have definitely improved, but it takes a detachment from work, which is not easy when you're passionate about what you do and when you want to succeed. I have a colleague who also used to be a Secretary General, and she always told me, Aarti, you can love your job as much as you want, but it's never going to love you back. Remember that. And that's so true. And I used to tell myself that for years, and it never helped me. I kept saying it, but I couldn't translate that into action. But I have to say, the current situation, as much as it's causing trouble and suffering for so many people, it's actually helped me spend more time with my family and be a lot more positive, even if I feel I'm working harder than ever right now at this particular time. I think the positivity comes from the fact that from all that we see going on around us and on the news, you really appreciate your family at this time when so many people are not able to be with their family or losing them. So that tells us how easy it is for us to take family for granted and neglect them. And how important it is to have discipline and a clear perspective on what's important in life. You know, it's easy to hide behind your work and say you're busy, and you know, you build up this, you build up your profession into the be all and end all of everything. So when people tell you, you know, remember what's important, get your priorities right, those are not cliches, they're real. And I wish I had been able to imbibe them and implement it earlier in my life, but I'm doing it now.
Excellent, that's amazing. And now on to my final question. Since this series is about girls and women in technology, do you have any career or tech advice for girls or women in technology, especially entering a male-dominated profession?
Yeah, so generally I feel I have a good relationship with most of the men I work with, and I work with a lot of them. But I think you will always encounter men or women who want to undermine or bring you down for whatever reason. It could be envy of your position. They might perceive you as competition or as a threat, or maybe they just had a bad day, who knows. But for me, I think what I've learned is that humility, confidence, and compassion are fundamental traits to deal with this. And courage is another one. And that's not always easy for me. I hate confrontational situations, so I'm always digging deep to muster up the confidence to tackle issues. But you have to, and that's where compassion also comes into it. You have no idea what's going on in somebody else's life. Maybe they're ill, maybe they didn't sleep well, maybe they have some kind of deep-seated insecurity that's being projected onto you. So it's important not to take attacks and challenges personally. It's important to put them in perspective and always keep communications channels open. I think what's absolutely fundamental as well is to be on top of your game. As a woman, I think you shouldn't think that you can wing it with looks or charms or all the nice ladylike things that we can be good at. Those things might help in little ways. And I think it's important to be memorable, but ultimately people in business care about what's in your head and how you're going to add value. So do the work, add the value. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of new challenges, and be ready to adapt. I think women are particularly good at that.
Do you have any anecdotes that you can share?
Yeah. In fact, I had a really funny experience quite early on in my days in ISOA, and one that maybe illustrates a very classic scenario. So every year, ISOA hosts an annual dinner for our members and for some guests. And back in 2006, which was one of our first dinners, I wanted to introduce myself to a CEO that I hadn't met before. And he was speaking with some others. I remember tapping him on the shoulder, and he turned around and said, "No, thank you." He thought I was a waitress. So I tapped him again, and he did it again. He turned around, he said, "No, merci." He said, "No, thank you." Finally, I really had to speak up and tell him that I was the Secretary General of ISOA. And then with great finesse, he cringed a little, but then he invited me to a satellite launch. And so that was really nice. But I think, you know, when and if you have successes, it's important to share them. It's really important to praise others. you might be very smart and you might do something very successfully, but most of the time you probably had a success because you were supported by others, whether it's because of their know-how or the moral support they provided, or whatever. So for me, I try to never miss an opportunity to elevate my colleagues too, through recognition in front of their superiors, or just through positive feedback. It's important. Don't let your ego lead you. Tame your ego and lead by example. Try not to be naive. I am still so naive, and that's one of the things that I really need to try to improve. It's important to be assertive, and what works best for me is to be myself and not try to imitate other people. Life and work are not role play situations. They are realities every day that are going to drive your personal and professional growth, but who you are. So if you have to act your way through your work just because you think that you naturally are not what you should be, that takes effort. It's fake and it can't be fun. So be yourself, work on yourself, like yourself, even if you have faults and you can improve. I truly believe that others see the integrity within us and the efforts that we make. And as long as we continue to show improvement and progress, I believe that that takes us forward.
Absolutely, that's incredible. I really enjoyed your story as well about the CEO. That certainly sounds like a win-win situation for both of you. Okay, thank you, Aarti. So that concludes my questions to you. It's time for you to put me in the hot seat. Do you have any questions that you may want to ask?
Meera, I admire you. When I was reading your bio, I mean, you were the traditional smart, like I was not. You speak the language of software and IT, which I find really complicated. How did you get into that, and what do you like most about it?
I must admit, I didn't really have a good insight into what the world of technology looked like when I was starting out doing my A-levels and deciding on what career path I wanted to take next. I only used a computer at school to type up my coursework. This is going back to the late 90s, so not too long ago. And I didn't really have any mentors to help me understand what technology was all about and all the different career paths you can take as a technologist. My family were also more so, in fact, are more in the medical and financial sector. And I certainly didn't want to follow in the shadow of my siblings, simply because I felt we had totally different personalities, no offense to them. So no medical, no finance, technology was an emerging industry at the time. So I made the decision to take a different career path simply because it looked exciting and dynamic. I decided to study computer science at university. I guess going back to your question about how did I get into the industry, I'd say I was guided by the fact that I didn't want to do what the family were doing. I followed my heart and my skill set and did something I thought I could be passionate about. What do I like most about technology? I'd say as a person, I love to find find a solution to a problem, test and monitor it, go back, double check, and ensure that a solution is found and it's the right solution and that it works. This sort of translates into the job that I do. I work as a software tester, and it allows me to do exactly all of that, apply my analytical skills and attention to detail, and deliver high quality software products. I also get to work with a team of diverse professionals within IT. I work with developers or coders. I work with business analysts, project managers, and senior business stakeholders. I get a lot of energy from the people I work with. I'm passionate about people, and I really enjoy teamwork and creativity, and I feel that fits in with who I am as a person. And merging this with what I do as a profession really excites me.
That's great. You know, as we're both Indian, I think very very often we feel pressured to go into something scientific. I mean, I didn't because I couldn't, because it's not what I was good at. But you did really. But if you could go back and speak to your 15-year-old self, is there anything that you would tell her?
Wow, that's a great question. So I guess My story is a little different to most people, as I'm proud to say I was born in East Africa, in Kenya, Nairobi. I emigrated to England when I was 13 years old. There was a huge culture change. I was a little shy, and actually, much like yourself, I was quite naive. And I found myself being bullied at school in the first year because I looked a bit different. You know, you're a teenager, you might have a few spots on your face, and the kids laugh at you. And I also spoke with a slight accent. So I was bullied quite a lot in the first year. But by the time I was 15, I had the experience of being bullied and going through a difficult time. My self-doubt, no doubt, kicked in. I didn't have any self-belief. And actually, looking back, that really saddens me. That's the kind of person or that's how I felt at the time. But as a grown woman, I think going back now to my 15-year-old self, because of the bullying, these are the things I would say to my younger self. Be bold, because I feel now looking back, I was swayed by other people's opinions because I felt quite shy and timid. The second thing I would tell myself is be more assertive. You touched upon that earlier as well. I did deal with my bullying at the age of 13, but I wish I had been more assertive and actually continued to carry that assertion on like a cloak and made it a part of my professional life as well. I think it would come in handy when it comes to making assertive decisions within your business profession. And lastly, I'd say listening to my gut. Whether it's a career or job move, listening to your instincts a little bit more would have been right for me. I often had opportunities that I would pass up because I wouldn't listen to my intuition, and instead I'd go along with what others thought was right for me.
Yeah.
So I guess to summarize, whether or not my 15-year-old would listen to me, I would say be bold, be assertive, and listen to your intuition.
That's great. Meera, I have to say that, you know, as we get older, we accumulate more knowledge, we know more, and we realize that we have more experience. But when I speak to you, I always, and even my employee, I have a great woman who works with me in ESOA. The inspiration and how much we learn, even from the younger generation, is not to be underestimated at all, really. Because in fact, the younger generation is confronting new challenges that we didn't have to confront. And we can still learn and evolve from observing that and from engaging with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.